Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. Guys, we have to take a look today at the New York Islanders. Guys, it's been frustrating. It's been frustrating watching the Islanders here recently, and I can officially say here that the Islanders season has come to a close. And after all the success the Islanders had between 2020 and 2021, going to the Eastern Conference Finals, being legitimately over the past 2 years the best competition to the Tampa Bay Lightning, bringing them to Game 7 in both of those series, ultimately falling short this year. Very far short after those successful seasons, now missing the Stanley Cup playoffs. We have to take a look at what happened this season for the Islanders, what went wrong, what guys left the organization, came in, and obviously we have to get into the future as we get closer to the trade deadline. What's Lou's idea of what he wants to do, as well as some trades, and going into the summer, what the Islanders need to address. So we're going to go over all that today. So the New York Islanders, it looks very bleak for the Islanders in what it's just such a Jekyll and Hyde team this year. They play really well against teams that maybe they shouldn't beat. They play well against the Boston Bruins at home, a team that's fighting in a wild card spot right now to make the playoffs. The Islanders won that game. And then they lose games like to the Seattle Kraken earlier this month. Their first shutout of the season for the Kraken at the bottom, the basement of the NHL standings. They give them their first shutout of the season. Third worst team in the NHL. And then the big KO, the big pop. The big pop was the other night against the Montreal Canadiens. A Sunday matinee game where the Montreal Canadiens, who had nothing to lose, against the Islanders that were everything desperate could imagine. The most desperate team recently, and they've played like it, but the Islanders just didn't have the juice. And the problem is, we've been saying that about the Islanders just too much this season. And the problem is the Islanders run off of motivation, run off of that juice, because they aren't the most skilled team in the league. They aren't the fastest team. They aren't the most skilled. They aren't the best at scoring goals and this and that. So the Islanders, when they lose the heart in there, you could tell that things really, really go sideways for this team. And it's frustrating to watch because the Islanders have been, like I said, really gained a lot of respect the past 2 years. But you can't just do it for 2 years and then, all right, we're back to where we were. No, that's not how this works. And unfortunately, the Islanders have fallen into that. Now, I think what's good is the expectations are high for the Islanders. And Matt Barzal said in a post-game press conference a couple days ago, he was saying how the standard is higher now. We are a better franchise. We are a higher prestige organization. We can't afford to, settle for this and be okay with it. And I think that's the good thing here. I think there is some life here in terms of what that building block has done, but it's almost like they built, 85% of the sandcastle, and now, somebody knocked it over with their shoe, and now you're starting at like 50% again, and you got to work your way all the way back up. But that's how this works, and I think the Islanders kind of got that exemplified in that game against the Habs. Now, Ilya Sorokin has played out of his mind, and maybe that's part of the thing. He wasn't his best. Andrew Hammond, who got his first NHL win since 2016, remember the Hamburglar? He's been a journeyman through the NHL. He went to Colorado. He went to Minnesota, got traded to the Canadiens last week because the Habs literally had no goaltending, and now he gets his first win in 6 years in the NHL, and it's the very Islanders. It's like what's that saying? When things are down, they just stay like when it rains, it pours. That's what it is. When it rains, it pours, and that's where the Islanders are at right now. You look at where the Islanders sit in the NHL standings. In terms of the NHL standings, in terms of league-wide, they sit 25th. Their neighbors right now are the San Jose Sharks and the Blackhawks, who, mind you, are both ahead of them, and the Ottawa Senators and the Philadelphia Flyers, who are basically right next to them. Here's the thing. There is slight hope for the Islanders. The Islanders have played 45 games this season. the Sabres, the Flyers, the Senators, the Blackhawks, the Sharks, all these teams that are around them, they played at least 49 games. Some of them have even played 51, 52 games. So the Islanders are 5 to 7 games behind pretty much every team here. The problem is the Islanders are still not that good. So when they make those games up, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win them. And then you have the situation where they were on that Western Canadian road trip last week. They beat Vancouver, they lost to Edmonton, and then they lost to Calgary. They played 3 games in 4 nights because they were making up that schedule for what they lost. And unfortunately, the Islanders are going to play a lot of hockey here up until the end of the regular season. So let's say, best case scenario, the Islanders don't sell at the deadline. They go on this crazy winning streak. They make these games back. They win those games, and they find themselves about 5 or 6 points from a playoff spot, maybe between Boston and Detroit and some of those teams right there. You still have to get in the playoffs, and they're going to be beat up and bruised in the playoffs. And I just don't know if that's necessarily feasible. You look right now at the playoff picture. So in the Eastern Conference, you've got the 2 wild cards. You have Washington and Boston, who each have 65 and 62 points. And the first team out of the wild card, which is the Red Wings, they have 52 points, which is 10 points less than the Boston Bruins. So that shows you just how big of a gap there is right now between playoffs and non-playoffs right now in the Eastern Conference. And then you look at the teams, you've got Columbus and the Islanders. The Islanders are 8 points away from Columbus, who have 51 points. So technically, the Islanders are basically, they are 19 points from a playoff spot. So even if they win those 5 games over the Bruins, they are 19 points away. Best case scenario, the Islanders are still 10 points away from the Bruins. And that's kind of how things have gone. And we're going to see a market in the Eastern Conference in particular. You have a lot of have-nots. So you basically have your playoff picture laid out for you. Unless somebody goes on a crazy tirade, like a big run, maybe Detroit or Columbus. But other than that, everybody else is dead in the water. The Senators have 41 points. The Flyers have 40. The Sabres have 40. New Jersey has 39. And God, Montreal has 29 points. 29, god damn, 29 points. So that's how things are at right now in the Eastern Conference. And I'm going to have to do a video on the buyers and sellers of the deadline too, because this is very interesting. In the Western Conference, it's much more, there's only a 3-point gap, a 2-point gap between playoffs and non-playoffs in the wild card situation. So the Islanders right now, it's been a rough season. And I think the problem with the Islanders is we're starting to see some of their issues start to come up in terms of how they play. So obviously their big game is the dump and chase game. The Islanders like to dump and chase the puck. And I talked about this in a video earlier in the year. It was pretty obvious and teams have just kind of run with it. So the Islanders dumping the puck. You have Matt Martin dumping the puck and you have Casey Cizikas coming in to forecheck. Now what we're seeing is one defenseman will go get the puck behind the net. He'll go along the boards, go get the puck behind the net. The other defenseman is purposely interfering or getting in the way of that forechecker, which would be Casey Cizikas. So even if he gets him off for 1 or 2 seconds, that gives that defenseman enough time behind the net to corral the puck, get the puck, and move it back out and dish it up for a breakout. So the Islanders' idea of dumping and chasing the puck, they just end up losing the possession. And they just turn the puck over every time they dump in the puck. And that's where a new strategy has to come in for Barry Trotz. And that's going to be a bit of an adjustment. The other thing, obviously, is what everybody's talking about. It's the easier thing to recognize than the tactics that I mentioned. You're looking at the Islanders as an older team. The Islanders are old. And truthfully, that is probably their biggest hindrance right now. They're trying to bring in guys that just don't have it anymore. And I'm saying that in the nicest way I can. You look at the Islanders right now. So they have $2 million in cap space. So here is some of their guys. So you have 37-year-old Zach Parise. Not really the best. 32-year-old Matt Martin. 32-year-old Josh Bailey. 31-year-old Anders Lee, 31-year-old Kyle Palmieri. You see a theme here? 39-year-old Andy Green, 44-year-old Zdeno Chara, 33-year-old Semyon Varlamov, 33-year-old Thomas Hickey, 31-year-old Richard Panik. Those are buried contracts, but you get the point. The Islanders are fairly old. And in today's NHL that has gotten so fast and skilled, those guys are dinosaurs. They are a few a dozen. And the reason for that is they're usually retired playing on the golf course. And unfortunately, I think that is what's going to happen to a lot of those guys. But the problem is the Islanders are kind of locked in on some of them. Kyle Palmieri is probably going to be difficult to move because he hasn't been that good, and he just signed that contract with the Islanders. Not looking so good right now, right? It makes you wonder, maybe they should have kept Jordan Eberle. The other thing to look at is defense, right? Zdeno Chara, probably going to go. Andy Green, again, those two guys in particular, I see whenever teams score, those guys are always on the ice, and it's like almost to the point where it's like he's just like, damn. I get that they're veterans. Keep them for the rest of the season. There's nothing to lose. Let them play, and then send them off, and that's it. And call it a day. But the problem is now you're stunting the young guys from playing. You're stunting Sebastian Aho from playing and getting some NHL ice time. Even Noah Dobson, who was in the top 4, but still limiting Noah Dobson's minutes a little bit. And even trying out some of the young guys in the pipeline. What about bringing up Bodie Wild, Parker Witherspoon? What about bringing those guys up just to see what they've got? Mitch Von de Sample. What did those guys have that maybe the Islanders, instead of going out and getting this big free agent that truthfully they don't have the money to do, why don't you test some of those young guys out at the end of the season, not super high expectations, and just see what you have. See what you have in your organization, because there's nothing to lose. The Islanders are 19 points out of a playoff spot 2 months before the end of the regular season, right? February, March, April. I thank God. Oh, God. This winter has gone by really quickly here in New York. We've gotten a little bit of snow, and it's been very nice. I'm actually wearing shorts today. But yeah, that's kind of where things are at. Like you're at a point now in the season where it's starting to get warm, and you're not anywhere near a playoff spot. And I think the Islanders have to accept they are not good enough this season. And those games, really, that Western Canadian road trip should have gave it away. The Seattle game, like there were games that the Islanders had to win and they didn't. And like I said, that home game against the Kraken that got rescheduled, Eberle's return, the two games between Edmonton and Calgary, they looked slow and sluggish. Definitely in that Calgary game, they did not look good. And then even here, I mean, you lose to the Sabres to finish that road trip. You lose to the Canadiens. Like, it's kind of a dud season for the Islanders, and that's definitely tough news to hear. But that is where the Islanders are at. So, guys, let me know what you think. In the comment section down below, what do you think of the New York Islanders situation? They need to get younger. They need to have some schematic changes. What do you think is next for the Islanders? Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and let's go Islanders.